Hi there, lovely YouTube video viewing audience. It's Mickey P here, and this is the first episode of what I'm hoping will be an ongoing series where I'm taking a look at modern releases of retro PC games. So I'm looking at them from sort of a technical standpoint in terms of what's actually included in the package, how it compares to what you originally got, and whether the way they've set it up to run on modern PC systems is any good or not. So I'm tentatively going to call this new series Mickey P's Retro Reviews. For this first installment, we'll be taking a look at King's Quest, specifically the first 3 King's Quest games, and more specifically this pack on GOG that contains King's Quest 1, 2, and 3. On GOG, it's currently up for the somewhat awkward price of $13.59 in fun Australian money, so I think that's 10 of your American dollars if you're a United Statesian, and I guess the same amount of money in Euroland or Britainland. But yeah, money. It's weird and different in different countries. Like with most games on GOG, once you've purchased it, you can download it as a standalone DRM-free installer, or you can use their GOG Galaxy client, which gives you nice features like auto-updating and stuff like that. But either way, it's all DRM-free, which is great because DRM is bad and silly. So from a technical standpoint, all 3 of these games are basically set up the same way. So to keep things simple, I'll just be talking about all 3 at once. And all 3 of them run through ScumVM, and if you're not familiar with that, it's an open source re-implementation of a lot of the old 2D point-and-click adventure game type engines. Originally, it just covered the LucasArts Scum engine, but now covers all sorts of engines from various different companies, including Sierra's AGI engine, which is what these games use. So now let's take a look at how these games run with the way GOG set them up in ScumVM. So first, let's talk a bit about the graphics. So if you're familiar with older PCs, you'd know that the monitors aren't widescreen, they're just 4x3. But if you look at this ain't 4x3. So essentially what's happening here is the image is kind of stretched out a bit, not to the full 16:9, but like, I think it's to a 16:10 aspect ratio. So the reason that's happening is basically because of like pixel aspect ratios. And the short version is that on a CRT monitor, pixels don't have to be square, and most games of this era would run at a 320x200 resolution, which is not an exact 4x3 ratio, but that's how it was displayed on a CRT monitor because the pixels don't have to be square. Problem is, the default way ScumVM setup assumes all pixels are square, so it'll just scale the original image up to the size of your monitor without actually changing the shape so that it's a proper 4x3 ratio. So this is something you can fix if you want to in the graphic settings for ScumVM, but then that means we're getting into the kind of fiddling around with options that seems like it puts off a lot of more recent gamers from trying out these older games. So other than that aspect ratio issue, these games will give you nice crispy pixels without any filtering or smoothing or any of that silly stuff. So now let's talk a bit about the sound. So the default way ScumVM works with these games is that it uses the Tandy 3-voice sound for these games. So let's have a quick listen to how that sounds. So that might sound pretty like primitive and plinky plonky, but it's actually better than what a lot of us heard for these games. So to get this sort of sound, you had to either have a PC Junior or a Tandy computer, and the PC Junior was a commercial flop, and I'm not even sure if Tandy was a thing outside the US, so the rest of us were just stuck with the single voice PC speaker. And this was before sound cards, so you didn't really have much choice in the matter, you just had whatever your system came with. So it's great that we're getting the best option by default here, especially since back in the day, not a lot of people got to hear that. Now if you want to, you can adjust this in the options too, for example if you want to really hear that single voice PC speaker sound. So aside from the looks and sounds, let's have a look at the actual gameplay. So originally the way these games played was you control your character with the cursor keys on your keyboard, and then you type in commands to do actions. So that's still pretty much how they work here, but one thing that ScumVM has added is mouse support. So this basically lets you click to move your character around, like in the later point-and-click style adventure games. And this wasn't something you could do in the original releases of these games, although I do think the Amiga versions maybe supported it. And to be honest, it kind of bugs me a bit because it's sort of inauthentic to how these games originally came out, but it doesn't really do any harm to have it as a feature, and I think some people probably find it makes the games a bit easier to play. And like everything else, it's configurable if you want to poke around in the settings. So I feel I should point out one slightly weird interface thing that I noticed. So if you click on the area where you type the text in, you get this sort of weird keypad interface popping up. And I think it's part of ScumVM support for like tablet devices or phones or whatnot, like devices without a keyboard to let people be able to type the commands in. But it feels kind of weird to have it enabled on a release like this. And I didn't have much luck getting it to actually do anything, but oh well, it exists in the engine for some reason. So another issue that I want to point out with how the game plays is the loading and saving system. So rather than having the original interface for the same games, we get the ScumVM save game interface. This has the advantage of giving you more save slots and attaching screenshots of the save game and stuff, but it has the huge disadvantage of being an ugly, gaudy, bright orange. And I personally feel this clashes pretty badly with the aesthetic of the rest of the game, and while I don't necessarily object to the extra features it gives you, I do wish they'd maybe skinned it to look a bit less out of place or something. And yes, you can adjust this in the settings as well, but then you're missing out on like the screenshots and the extra save slots and all that stuff. So let's talk a bit about manuals, because with older games like this, a manual can be somewhat important, especially in King's Quest III where you actually need it to finish the game. So the good news is all three of these games have the full manuals included as full-colour PDF scans, including the all-important spell recipes from King's Quest III. But what's not included here is the technical reference cards that came in the original boxes. But that being said, these technical reference cards aren't really that useful these days, since it's unlikely anyone's really going to need information on making backups of install disks or whatever, so I don't think this is really a great loss. So I want to touch a bit on versions. So essentially the games as released on GOG are based on the MS-DOS releases, which came out in about 1987 in these brownish gold boxes. So there were earlier releases that booted directly off the disk, which I think were in these grey boxes. And the first game actually had this PC Junior only release that was published by IBM. So I think the earlier releases of the games didn't have like nice features like menus, for example, but really they're historical curiosities more than anything else. Basically, the versions you're getting here are the most easily usable versions of the games, since emulating the old boot disk versions could be a bit fiddly and they're not really supported by ScumVM or anything. So one other funny version thing is that the version of King's Quest II included here shows up as version 2.1, but on my original floppy disk I've got version 2.2, so I'm not really sure what the difference is, and I think version 2.1 is what made it onto the earlier releases of collections that Sierra did in the 90s, like this one, so I guess this is just more of a weird, curious thing. In terms of versions, I kind of suspect that they may have just used one of these old Sierra collections as their source material for the copies of the games, and that kind of makes sense because it's probably a lot easier to get hold of than finding old floppy disks. But what is a real issue in terms of versions is the missing King's Quest I remake. So back in 1990, Sierra remade the first King's Quest in their new SCI engine, which gave high-resolution graphics and actual sound card support, and they made quite a lot of enhancements to the gameplay. I've got no idea why this is missing here, because all the collections released in Sierra's heyday included both versions, and with the 2006 Vivendi release, this was actually the only one they included. So I think it's a real shame that this version's missing, and I don't really understand why, since a lot of the other Sierra game re-releases on GOG will have both originals and remakes. So it's just a really odd omission, I think. I feel like a lot of people are going to be asking things like, so, is this pack worth getting? Now, I haven't really talked much about the games themselves so far, because I really want to take a more technical focus to the re-release aspects with this series. but I feel like I should say something, so I guess my take is that the King's Quest series was a really influential part of PC gaming. Like, it kind of defined this sort of graphic adventure game. So if you're curious about the history of games, you should definitely check this out. And the point that sort of goes along with that is that you should be curious about the history of games. And I feel like a lot of PC gaming history kind of gets ignored, either because people only care about the latest and greatest, or because the nostalgia that gets marketed to us is a very sort of specific console game-oriented nostalgia. So I really hope that people are still interested enough in these games that they want to try them for themselves and see what they're like. As for whether the games are any good to play these days, I mean, personally, I'm actually most experienced with the AGD Interactive fan-made remakes of the first two games. I've really only played bits of the originals to try them out. But that's not the point about whether you're able to finish them or if they're any good by modern standards. Whether you like them or not, it's important to know about them and what they're like, and the best way to do that is to try and play them for yourselves. And as for whether this pack's a good way to play the games, I know I've been pretty critical in this video, but to be honest, this setup works fine and you don't really need to tinker. If you do want to tinker, one thing I definitely recommend is tweaking graphic settings to fix the aspect ratio, and the rest of it is really just personal preference. But if you don't want to tinker, that's totally fine. I want to reiterate that the games run absolutely fine out of the box. The missing 1990 remake is also a pretty glaring omission, but that being said, it is arguably a separate game. I mean, there's lots of games that GOG doesn't have. So all I can really recommend with that is try and get hold of your own copy, or hope that GOG gives this pack an update someday. So I guess to sum up, you should indulge your curiosity and you should try out the original King's Quest games. If you do that, this pack works absolutely fine for that. Thanks so much for watching the first episode of Mickey P's Retro Reviews. Since it's kind of a new thing I'm doing with this series, I'd really appreciate any feedback you can give me. Like anything you particularly liked or didn't like, or if I've made any errors, please let me know. And you can either do that in the comments, or you can find me on Twitter at MICPP42. I'm Mickey P. Bye.